second day in a row, we will be shining the spotlight on MS. It's a condition which disproportionately affects women in Ireland. The ratio is 3-1, but also Ireland has one of the highest diagnosis rates in the world, with 1 in 500 people getting the autoimmune condition over their lifetime. Now, yesterday we heard from Marty and John, who are taking part in the Looping the Loop Open Water Rowing Challenge. They'll be hoping to get 50 kilometres around Loop Head to raise funds and to raise awareness of multiple sclerosis. But they're not the only ones. Samantha McCarthy joins me in studio right now. Samantha, you are most welcome to the programme.
Thank you, Daragh. It's great to be here.
Samantha, you're a bit like Marty and John in that you're also mad for a challenge. And in the past, I've been telling the listeners all day, because I was in awe about that 200 kilometres that you walked in the month of May, and I believe it was around COVID times. And if you had to tell me that I had to walk 200 kilometres in a year, I think I'd fairly have a sense I'd fairly fall to the floor with shock. But it's something that you do for a bit of crack.
Yeah, for a bit of crack, definitely. I suppose to socialise and connect with people, to absolutely raise awareness about these really important issues. And I suppose I break it down, Daragh. If you look, and you're right, it was during COVID times, so that social connectedness was certainly challenged that time, but we had our 2 kilometre loop that we could walk. I'm really not wanting to bring people back to those times. But like, if you break it down into more manageable achievements, 200 kilometres that time was probably maybe no more than 8 kilometres a day over the month of May. So it was doable. And when you're not walking the journey on your own, when you've someone by your side, it makes it that little bit easier. But certainly I'm not a stranger to fundraisers and setting challenges for myself. I think it's part of what has kept me going through this diagnosis.
And let's just focus on multiple sclerosis for a minute, which in itself is a bit of a tongue twister to say, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's an autoimmune condition. It's not necessarily genetic, but people can be genetically predisposed. It's not something you're born with either. You develop it later in life. There are a number of symptoms which we'll get to. One of those, for example, is muscle weakness, is a common one we hear on the show when we have guests from around the county who've been living with MS. But for you, Samantha, it was vision.
Yeah, a little bit like Marty yesterday. Marty, when he was talking on the show, had mentioned that his initial symptoms were around blurred vision. For me, it was full-on optic neuritis, which meant I had a complete loss of vision for a period of time. In my case, in my left eye. But I'll always put a health warning with all of these things, Daragh, when I am talking about the diagnosis itself, because there are many symptoms within multiple sclerosis. Like, multiple sclerosis means multiple scars or many scars, and that's what you'll find around the brain and the spinal cord. You'll find these lesions when there are episodes. But for me, it was optic neuritis initially. Then it was optic neuritis and Bell's palsy. Then it was Bell's palsy and sciatica, which eventually led to loss of power in the left leg. But all of that came back. But where I want to be really, really cautious and careful with the language that I used this morning is people can have Bell's palsy and optic neuritis and sciatica as standalone issues, which do not mean that they have multiple sclerosis. But it's really, really important that when there are concerns around your health and well-being, that you go and seek advice and guidance. So while I talk about the symptoms this morning, I don't want to raise alarm bells in people thinking, do I have MS or some other autoimmune or neurological condition? But I'd certainly be watching the signs. And for me, and for a lot of people with a diagnosis of MS, optic neuritis or that loss of vision or blurred vision is one of the real telltale signs.
If we can just focus back on your own story, Samantha, and your optic neuritis, and when you first noticed roughly 25, 26 years ago at this point that you were having blurred vision, that you were having some sight difficulties. I know that from a previous piece you did that your diagnosis took 7 to 12 months.
Yeah.
Could you just tell us, maybe you can cast your mind back to that period, that, I suppose, uncertainty when you had your difficulty with your vision and you didn't know why?
Yeah, it's interesting, Daragh, and apologies if I'm wrong, but you've looked across the table to me as if that's a long time. In terms of MS, like 8 to 12 months is a very quick diagnosis from what I understand. My doctor at the time was very much on the ball. People can have MS for years and never know. So for me, I was working as a tutor at the time. So the blurred vision didn't initially concern me because I was a computer tutor. I was all the time on screens, and I was thinking, oh, maybe this is because I've now entered a job where I'm 8 hours of the day working on computers. But I remember pulling at my eye all the time, thinking there's just not something right here. And it was a bank holiday weekend when I had the blurred vision for the second time that I went to an optician here in Ennis. And I have to say they were amazing. I was 22 at the time, so it was quite young to be having vision problems like that. And they had said the left side was quite poor in terms of what I could actually see. And they had said, look, we'll look at this again next week. But by the Tuesday, the sight was completely gone on my left eye. And I went to my own doctor at that point because I also had some of the symptoms of Bell's palsy. And I remember Dr. Fior, for anyone that remembers him in Ennis, he's a big man in terms of tall and strong, and he put the eye chart up on the wall and he stood beside it and he just said to me, tell me, Sam, what of the letters on the wall can you see? And I said, Dr. Fior, I cannot even see you holding it. And he said, okay, wow. Can you go out to the waiting room for a few moments? And then when I came back in, he handed me a letter. And he said, can you bring this over to A&E? And I was going, I'm going to be staying in A&E. And he said, no, I don't think it's anything to worry about. Just bring it over and they'll run a few tests on you. Me being me, I opened the letter on the way down the road, and at 22 years of age, I saw suspected MS written on the letter. And I rang my mum. And I had a beautiful son who was 4 or 5 at the time. And my mum came home from town and I just said, let's walk over to the hospital and let's think about this. So I didn't initially go into panic. I knew it was something to do with the muscles. And within 3 weeks, I was down in Cork, Mercy Hospital, being diagnosed.
And Samantha, clearly it's a very emotional story. And how did that impact your day-to-day life? You mentioned your family there. You mentioned the support that they gave you. But I know, like, with MS, there's days where you can be really strong, where you can feel like there's not a bother in the world on you. And then there's another day when the tingles, when the muscle weakness, when the sight, all of it can come crashing in together. So how's that? I suppose like 20 years is such a long time ago. How has that impacted your life since?
It's impacted it in many ways. Like, initial diagnosis was really, really scary. You wouldn't be human if you weren't told that you're now living with a chronic health condition and not worry about it. By the time I got to Cork, my left, not only was the sight gone and the Bell's palsy setting in, but my left leg was gone as well. There was no power in it, so I was literally dragging it behind me. And I was very far away from home as well. I remember, and again, it is quite emotional, I remember being in Ennis Hospital waiting for either that bed in Beaumont or Cork Mercy, and the bed came up in Cork Mercy Hospital first, and I rang my mum, and she flew over the road with Dylan in a buggy, and the ambulance doors closed just as they got to us, which was really, really hard, really, really hard. He was only a small baba at the time, and I was also just in a new relationship. Myself and Brian had been together a year. We were engaged at that stage, and initially fear, initially overwhelm. and catastrophising maybe a little bit in terms of this is my life, it's never going to be the same again, I'm going to end up in a wheelchair. And when I was coming here today, I was thinking about what's really important in terms of the messaging. And I go back to my mum again. And when I came home from hospital, I remember about 6 weeks in having a particularly bad day and probably lying down on poor old Brian's lap and crying maybe. And my mother came into the kitchen and just looked at me and said, Sam, I know you're scared, I know you're worried, but you cannot stay with your head on his lap. You have to get up, you have to get out. And I've probably never looked back since then, because I suppose we just have to play the hand that we're dealt with. Daragh, things have come on so much. There is so much support out there, and I know we'll probably talk about that. There's continued investment with the likes from money raised from the likes of these fundraisers that are constantly looking at researching the condition. How can we improve things for people? How can we improve the quality of life? I'll walk out here today and people will not know there's one thing wrong with me. So then why lie down under it? You have to get up and you have to keep going. And it's really... Marty and John spoke about this yesterday, that you're not alone. But at the end of the day, I'm the only one that can walk my journey with the support of everyone around me. So I do need to walk out of here today or wheel myself out of here, whatever life is going to deal me with. And then I'll take myself to Limerick and I listen to the people speak at the conference today in Limerick about the latest treatments and lifestyle and diet and nutrition and how you can help yourself. So really, I think it's in terms of diagnosis and to where I am now, I'm a lot stronger. I'm probably the healthiest I've ever been. I'm definitely the most informed that I've ever been. I'm stubborn, I'm resilient, and I'll keep going for as long as I can.
And Samantha, really good that you mentioned obviously the importance of diagnosis. Of course, this year's theme for World MS Day, that was so long and at such a, like, obviously your young 20s, such a formative time in your life, your whole world's ahead of you. You're thinking, am I going to travel? Am I going to do this course, go for this career? You just have no idea, but the world is your oyster. I suppose you're looking back now, and I'm sure there's plenty of other young girls and young guys that could well, even today, feel their first symptom, go to the doctor for the first time. Have people approached you with questions over the years, and if they haven't, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I really do love to help and support people, and I've just signed up to become a peer mentor for individuals who are newly diagnosed and individuals who are navigating their way over the years. Marty and John said it yesterday, and it was a really, really important message. You're not alone. There are services out there that have spent years building up a bank of resources such as MS Ireland and the community development workers and the HSE. They offer information, they offer courses, they offer physiotherapy. Go talk to them. I didn't at the beginning because I was so young at the time. The advice was, Sam, this actually could be a step back for you if you see people with disability that has set in. But actually now I can step into that situation and go into a room in Limerick today, perhaps being one of the very few people at this stage, at 26 years later, that's still walking. But I guarantee you, I learn more from the people who have really had to be resilient and courageous through the journey. So talk to people would be the first thing. You're not alone. There's loads of information out there. And the second really important thing that I would say to anyone, easier said than done, Daragh, but try not to worry. Stress does no favours for anyone living with any sort of chronic health condition. You need to find ways to be mentally resilient and mentally strong, because I'm a firm believer that if you have that mental resilience, you can fight anything and navigate anything. So hold hope, try not to worry. There's advancements in medication all of the time, and just try keep one step ahead of yourself, not 10,000 steps.
And Samantha, just before we go, we're towards the end now of what will be your 50 for the month of May. What way have you been making your way around the county?
I took an interesting route this month because I'm a real social creature, and I love getting out, seeing my friends, seeing my family, seeing the people that support me, and I've had that this month. But I've actually done an awful lot of solo walks this month, just to allow me the space. I've had a lot of changes in my life this year, and I've taken the month to just walk and reflect, walk and learn, walk and appreciate, and be grateful for everything that I have. I'm very grateful for the people that have walked with me, but I'm also very grateful for the opportunity that I've taken just to be in my own mind and be with my own breath for the month. But the social media around this whole event is incredible. People are having great fun. Really, really good fundraising events for this important cause.
And we can donate online, I assume.
Yes, through Multiple Sclerosis Ireland, and you can either donate specifically to the person that's doing the fundraiser, so you can follow me on my social media page, or you can just go to MS Ireland or MS Midwest. Everyone's going to appreciate some little bit of funding for this. There's lots of work to do. John spoke about this new incredible wellness hub that's going to be in Limerick. So whatever we can do to raise funds for the Wellbeing Hub for research is going to be really appreciated.